Hello, hello. So, in this recording, I will be taking a look at Matthew Perry's natal chart. Matthew Perry was best known for his role on Friends. He played Chandler Bing, the very witty and sarcastic and slightly socially awkward and kind of maybe commitment wary in the early seasons character on Friends, and he very sadly passed away in October of 2023. And I remember when I heard the news, I was quite shocked. It was something that came as kind of a shock. The first friend, so to speak, to pass away was very sad. But yeah, I will be taking a look at Matthew's natal chart and talk about some of the themes that I see here. So I knew a little bit about Matthew Perry's life before I started doing this reading, and I read a bit more about him today. And he was someone who, his parents split up when he was very young, and he developed an addiction problem. And he was very successful, as all the cast of Friends were. He was very successful in his role of Friends, and he was someone who very much identified with being interesting in a way that he was like funny. Like he wanted to be funny for people. He wanted to make people laugh. He wanted, Leonian attention in that way. So I mentioned Leonian, so you can see that he had Sun and Ascendant in Leo, Sun in the first house in Leo. Leo craves attention, and it's not always a bad thing. It sounds bad, like, oh, I want attention, this person wants attention. It sounds bad. We add a negative meaning to the word attention, but really part of Leo's soul agenda is to express their own qualities in a way that people appreciate them and get something from them. They want to inspire people and be inspired. They want to also inspire others to also express their qualities and make other people inspired. It's like, they want to laugh and they want to make other people laugh. And they want to be appreciated for that. They want to be appreciated for their qualities. And I remember when I was watching the Friends reunion movie, so to speak, that came out like a few years ago. It was very interesting to watch that after so many years of when Friends ended. Friends went from 1994 to 2004. He talked in that movie, or like whatever you want to call it, is we could say movie. Like he talked in that about how it was something like he felt like he had to get a laugh from people when he was acting on Friends, and if he didn't get enough laughs from people after a certain joke or something that he did or said or something that he was maybe adding to the character or the scene, he would be very down on himself. He wanted to get that attention. He wanted to get that appreciation for what he was giving because he identified with being someone who makes people laugh and who is witty and is charismatic maybe. And Leo can have those qualities in a very natural way as well. So they have the charismatic persona or personality or way of being. In this case, he had both Sun and Ascendant in Leo. So he had that naturally, and he also what he also had naturally was that he wanted to get appreciated for that. He wanted the applause. And his Sun, very significantly, was in quite a tight square with Neptune. And I have a square between Sun and Neptune. It's not as tight as his, but in my case, it's not about addiction. It's more about a loss of self in other ways and kind of a dissociative nature in me a little bit. Kind of a confusion about the self. But for a lot of people, it can manifest as this kind of addiction problem, because you're trying to lose yourself in something. You have like a loss of self. It's very difficult to explain, but I've made videos about Sun-Neptune aspects before and Sun-Square-Neptune aspects before, and what it comes down to me in my head always is that like there's a fragmented self. There's a loss of self that happened in childhood, perhaps. Something happened, and you're maybe confused now in your life about who you are. And so sometimes those people with Sun-Neptune aspects, they also try to escape from those feelings, maybe by abusing alcohol or drugs, or just trying to get into those states where they're in like an alternative reality, so to speak. So it's also just apt to have a Sun-Neptune aspect for an actor, a famous, successful, regarded actor, well-regarded actor. So Neptune has to do with acting and theater and the screen and illusions and deceptions and what we see on the screen, and we kind of get into it and we almost believe that it's real. When we're like watching Friends, it's almost like it's real. We get lost in it. And you can almost guarantee that the actors are also in some way lost in it. They're trying to lose themselves in the character. Good actors would try to do that in a way. Like they're trying to lose themselves and play their role and really get into it so that the people watching can get into it better as well, right? Of course, you see what I'm saying, right? So Sun-Neptune squares, especially with such a tight square, it can be just a fragmented self, a loss of self. There's almost like a loss. There's a grief almost when it comes to the self. You don't know who you are. You don't. And he had Sun in the first house, so he maybe was someone who kind of had a sense of himself very well. Also Leo ascendant, Leo Sun in the first house. But that square to Neptune would also give a kind of a confusion and a fragmentation of the self, or addiction issues is unfortunately common with Neptune aspects, Sun-Neptune aspects, and other Neptune aspects. So it's not surprising for me to know that this man had a Sun-Neptune square and such a tight Sun-Neptune square. And also I believe that when he talked about how he wants to get validation from people, get the applause from people, that might also be because maybe he on some level didn't have a good self-concept or a strong enough self-concept to not want that. So he wanted that validation from other people, maybe, so that he would have an affirmation that he is a good actor or a funny person, or whatever it was. So Leo wants validation, and also the Neptune square could mean that his Leo Sun maybe wanted validation in a way where he was fragmented in some way in his selfhood, that he was trying to get validated by others. He was trying to fill that gap with validation and applause, and also trying to fill that gap with drugs and alcohol. Unfortunately, that is a common theme with Neptune. It's just something that psychologically some people are drawn to, or in some unconscious or even conscious way. Like, I need that drink, and I need, drugs or whatever. So partly it's also just wanting to get out of the mundane. I have Sun Square Neptune. I want to get out of the mundane. I want to watch movies and get lost in them. I want to go to dance performances, art galleries, and get lost in them. I want to listen to music and get lost in them. It's very difficult to describe to someone who doesn't have those qualities as much. Like, what does that mean? You get lost in it. But it does feel like that, and those feel kind of like the right words for it, is that, like, you want to get lost in music when you have Sun-Neptune square. Like, you want to get that loss of self in some way. Like, it's like you merge with the music, you merge with the movie or whatever it is. So Sun-Neptune does make a good actor in some way, because the person is able to lose themselves in the character. And so when somebody else is watching, like I said, they lose themselves in the show or the movie because the actor is doing such a good job in a very natural way of losing themselves, quite literally losing themselves in the character. There's a loss of self, whatever form that takes with Sun Neptune. Moon in Scorpio, opposite Saturn. Emotional issues, emotional difficulties, hardness, coldness with the emotions perhaps, needing to maybe be comforted or validated again for your emotions. I have Moon in Scorpio, and I have my Moon in square to Saturn. It's similar. So, and his Saturn is in the 10th house. It's in the 10th house of public image and life success, really. It's funny, you'd almost expect him to have Jupiter in the 10th house, because Jupiter in the 10th house could mean very successful career, very successful public image. But he has Saturn there. And, so he probably had some inner stuff, to do with his career and his public image that were very emotional for him. Moon in Scorpio also can be quite emotionally private, because I think with Moon in Scorpio, like I know from experience that Moon in Scorpio, I can just tell from, people who are Moon in Scorpio, and I have Moon in Scorpio, they are experiencing more than what you think they are. They're feeling more than what you think they are. So they may not show it. They may not show, like Matthew maybe didn't always show everything that he was feeling when it comes to like his needs of comfort or validation or some kind of emotional support maybe. And maybe he didn't get that. Maybe there was this kind of loss of that support, also with parents breaking up. I have an experience with that as well. I have Moon square Saturn, and there's that. Interestingly, his Sun and Moon are in signs that are square each other. And I think that is very common to have like a Sun-Moon square with people whose parents broke up. There was separation, divorce, whatever. And I have a friend with Sun in Leo and Moon in Scorpio. And they're in square degree-wise. And his parents also are separated, broken up. So that can create a kind of a separation inside the child, the person whose parents are broken up. That can create a separation in the child, in the person. So, but he has a quintile. He actually has a quintile. You could say between Sun and Moon, but they're in signs that are square. So I would almost look at that as a square. But a quintile between Sun and Moon is interesting for self-expression, because it's almost like maybe he was able to, let's say, express his inner self in a way that was interesting for people. His Sun and Moon in a quintile, like kind of quirky ways of expressing yourself, quirky ways of expressing your inner emotions and your inner life in a way that is out there for the world to see. Sun in the first house, Leo rising, Leo Sun. People see this. People see you're putting yourself out there. People can see your feelings and your emotions through your acting, through your public, the fact that you're a public person. You have a public image, so people can see you for not necessarily who you are. Really, they don't know the depths of a Moon and Scorpio person probably, but they can see some elements of the person that comes across to them, especially if Sun and Ascendant are in the same sign. It can happen that the person doesn't have much of a filter when it comes to like how they are inside and how they present themselves. Although that Moon in Scorpio does make things more complicated, I would say, and more private, and there's more hidden layers with that we don't see. And it can just be emotional difficulties as well, emotional trauma in some cases. Let's be real here. Also opposite Saturn, emotional difficulties, and maybe he was very hard on himself in that he wanted the validation and he wanted the support of the audience or maybe co-stars. Maybe he wanted the support of his parents more, his family more. Maybe he wanted to maybe he had a hard relationship with himself, if that makes sense. So it's just that, like that need for support. And maybe he didn't express that all the way because of the moon in Scorpio. Yeah, let me pause and have a look at some other things. In terms of his acting, Mercury sextile Venus. Very good for just, let's see, Mercury sextile Venus. Yeah, it's close as well. So Mercury sextile Venus, good for communication, good for harmonious communication, good for making people laugh, good for engaging people. He did that on the screen with his acting. And also, I noticed immediately, Jupiter and Uranus in the third house. So Jupiter and Uranus in the third house, I would immediately kind of associate with the potential or the realization of just being a comedian, being a funny person, being an actor. Jupiter in the third house, having very open mind and being able to express that and being expansive and knowing what's going on around you and being able to kind of express ideas and concepts and talk well, speak well. And Uranus in the third house, that's incredible for sudden insights, quirky communication, sudden ideas, very good for acting, for comedians, for improvising. That is a very interesting position for Matthew because, Uranus in the third house, there with Jupiter in the third house, like just coming up with funny things to say, coming up with sudden electric, sometimes erratic ideas that make people laugh, and it just makes a lot of sense to me that he would have those things in the third house. Just that, the house of communication, the house of thinking and the speaking, and he used those in his acting. Those planets really came out in his acting, I think, in the way that he was expressing himself, through acting. So just coming up with ideas, coming up with, clever, and just coming up with ways to engage people, again, with that Mercury sextile Venus as well, right? Mars in the fifth house in Sagittarius. He had addiction issues, but he was also, energetic maybe. He was able to, let's say, have fun. Mars in the fifth house in Sagittarius, I would just label that as fun. And also philosophical, just able to engage people again through your way of having fun, and having fun on stage and having fun on the set, having fun on the screen, behind, like when he was shooting Friends, I'm sure there was a lot of fun that they were having. And that Sagittarius can be a bit of a prankster as well, Mars in Sagittarius, prankster, philosophy of fun. I want to have fun. I want to engage people. I want to be positive and optimistic at the end of the day. I want to bring joy. I want to bring light. I want to bring higher thinking. I want to bring, I want to, with Moon in Scorpio as well, maybe I want to have deeper conversations. I want to bring higher ideas and ideals to the world and who I'm speaking to. I want to inspire. Leo, again, wants to inspire. So there's that as well. Let's see what else. So also very beautiful, Venus trine Neptune. It's like 7 degrees orb, but I also have this position as well, Venus trine Neptune. And Venus trine Neptune is also good for like any kind of creative activity, acting, seeing beauty, seeing having an artistic flair in some way. So it's definitely good for speaking and acting and just being likable in some way, being like soft and pleasing in some way. As also the Venus sextile Mercury. So there's that as well. Venus in Cancer. I would say also one level of Venus in Cancer is this kind of having a squad of your own that you care for. And Friends was very much like, those 6 people were, you could tell that they were a squad. Like they were friends. They were a close group. In real life, I don't know how close specifically, everybody was with everybody. There might be nuances to that, but from what I've heard, they were just a close knit group. And Venus in Cancer, he probably really cared for the group. He cared about his associations with the group and with the connections that he made. Venus in Cancer can also be somebody who maybe is wary of outsiders. That's one level of Venus in Cancer. I don't know about that with him, but it's one level. And that also just comes from the fact that you're so in tune with your own groups that, one level of that might be that you exclude other people from that group if you have a tight-knit group. But it could just mean that you don't have that way of, maybe he didn't have that way of that being expressed, but he probably did have very much this tight-knit group love, like a love of the tight-knit group, and like it was like his family. Cancer is like the family, and Venus in Cancer very much enjoys having a social group of like family, friends, and loved ones that are close. It needs that to kind of express itself well. Mercury and Pluto in a conjunction in Virgo. I don't really know what to make of that in the second house. Maybe, he did have, obviously, with friends and everything, like he had his riches. So he might have been money-minded in some way. Pluto in the second might be very sudden riches, or just extreme riches, a lot of riches that come to you. But also, Mercury, I was just wanted to say, like, Mercury conjunct Pluto in Virgo also gives him that depth of communication and a critical nature in some ways. So able to see, like, I think when I saw him in a few interviews, he was definitely, you could see that he was like he was a deep thinker. Many of them were, if not all of them, the cast of Friends, like, definitely a few of them that I would say that about. But like Mercury conjunct Pluto is very deep communicator and deep thinker. And in Virgo, it gives this kind of analytical bent to it. So he was probably able to see through things and see through situations and get in touch with things in a way that was like intellectual. And maybe that's part of the things one of the things that gave him his wit. Also with the Jupiter and Uranus in the third house, he was witty. He was someone who was able to improvise, come up with his own lines, get into the character in like a witty way, make Chandler really funny and be funny, and while embodying him and just being funny in real life and just bringing that to the character. So Mercury conjunct Pluto, just able to penetrate to the depths of situations and information and what's going on in life. And so in Virgo, it does give this kind of analytical bent. So he probably did have that intellectual wit. Mercury, Virgo, conjunct Pluto, like he was able to penetrate into the depths of life in a funny, humorous way. Mercury can be quite funny as well. Like it's the wit, it's the wittiness. So he was witty because he could see through situations in life. He was able to connect with situations in life like a true comedian. Like he was able to get the nuance of the funniness and the irony of life. And I haven't read his book. He did write a book, I think just shortly before his death. I think it was called Friends, Lovers, and the Terrible Thing, where he talked about some of his experiences. And Mercury, Pluto, good for writing, good for having that communication method of writing, being able to, because when you're writing, we're often able to get out more information. Certainly in my case as well, like you can get out more information sometimes by writing than by speaking. Like you can penetrate into a certain situation in your head, and it just comes out in a more maybe fluent way sometimes when you're writing. But that's neither here nor there, I guess. Let's see what else. I think Matthew Perry also, obviously with the addiction and everything, there was a theme of, healing and trying to heal and having his periods maybe of remission and, trying to heal that. And I see, Jupiter opposite Chiron, and immediately I go to that and I think about that. Like Jupiter opposite Chiron. Also, I think Uranus is opposite Chiron. Jupiter is in a stronger opposition, let's say, if you want to say stronger. Like Jupiter is very much opposite Chiron. So Jupiter Chiron is about the potential to work on yourself when it comes to healing yourself, right? Just healing and being in tune with the experience of healing something. And with Chiron in Aries, part of that might have been just aggressive impulses and anger and trying to express your identity and your anger and your emotions in a way that doesn't cause too much chaos, but also stays true to yourself. Aries wants to stay true to itself, right? Chiron in Aries, but there's a wound related to that with the Chiron. So maybe he had a wound of wanting to express some of his more, let's say, aggressive or angry impulses, but not wanting to disrupt the harmony. Opposite Jupiter and Libra. Libra is very harmonious. Jupiter and Libra is very interested in relationships and harmony and balancing things, and just life is a balancing act. So I think with that opposition, there might have been that kind of tension inside of like, or swinging between like, okay, I'm going to express my anger or I'm going to just be harmonious, like that kind of trying to balance those two things. I'm going to finish up soon. I do want to talk about one more thing. So, well, at least one more thing. So North Node was in Pisces in the 8th house. And let's see here. So Pluto was opposite conjunct the South Node and opposite North Node. And Mercury was also opposite the North Node. And, it's sad to kind of interpret it this way, but it's like North Node in Pisces in the 8th house. 8th house is the house of death on some levels. And, Pisces is a water sign. And North Node is kind of where we're going in our life path and our life direction. And, he died in a hot tub, I believe. He basically drowned. So, I just made that connection of, that I'm getting sad thinking about this, but, the North Node in Pisces in the 8th house is like, how would I put it? It's like he was going towards that. That was like the end of his life was in water. It's that dissolving of everything, just being in water and just, your life ends in water. There's probably a lot more that I could say, but just a few of my thoughts about this chart. If I think of anything else, I could always make another video about him, or I don't know if I will, but there might be other things that I see later on. I might do a follow-up. I feel like I always say that and I never do it, but I might do it. And yeah, I hope to do more of these kinds of videos. If you have any suggestions, maybe of public figures, celebrities, famous people that you'd like me to cover, do let me know. And if you'd like a reading yourself or to connect with me, you can always email me at mattothinks@gmail.com. I'm happy to receive email, mattothinks@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment if you have any observations of your own or any thoughts about this. And of course, leave a like if you appreciated this, if you like this. And subscribe if you want more videos from me. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you.